What are your thoughts on the passing of Don Sutton?
Yeah, very sad. Obviously, I didn't see him play. I'm not old enough to have seen him play, but hearing him as a broadcaster and seeing some of the eulogies that have been put out there, very sad. It feels like baseball in particular over the last calendar year has just been decimated with the loss of some all-time great players, Hall of Famers, great managers. I mean, we saw Tommy Lasorda pass away just a couple of days ago, and it just seems like it's one hit after the other when it comes to all-time great major league baseball players or coaches or managers. It's just it's been sad to see. It really has been.
Before we get into this whole DeShaun Watson situation, because Jet fans are jumping for joy over here in New York, they're like sizzling, the sweat coming off their heads or whatever it's coming off of, because the story is coming out that DeShaun Watson might want to be traded. The Jets are the lead team right now because of all the draft stock. Thank you, Joe Douglas. What were your thoughts of the signing of our new coach, Robert Saleh?
Yeah, I'm big on Saleh. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know everything about him, like he's going to be this great coach. But considering the fact that the Jets were coming off of Adam Gase, they really couldn't do any worse than that. So the bar is set very low for Saleh, right? But here's what I like about him. What players are saying about him. The Jets have a culture problem. People don't want to play for them. They saw what happened with Le'Veon Bell and Jamal Adams, and you had this, just terrible reputation in league circles, kind of what the Texans are going through right now, right? So you don't want to deal with that. So you bring in Joe Douglas. He's highly respected. Now he gets to pick his coach. This was not Peyton Manning's recommendation. This was not a search firm, right? This was not Charlie Casserly or Ron Wolf. This is the football guy in Douglas making the football decision here, which is why I support it. And, I want him to hire a great staff now. I think bringing over LaFleur from the Niners is a really smart decision for the offensive coordinator role. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I won't lie. I was optimistic about Todd Bowles 5 years ago too. So you just never know, but I hope, the difference with Bowles and Saleh is, well, one, Saleh is a better coach. And then two, the general manager is not Mike McCagnon. It's Joe Douglas, who I think most Jet fans are very high on the potential for him going forward.
So you mentioned the Texans coaching search, and a lot of reports have came out that the Texans coaching search is like the worst spot to go to, they think, in the last 10, 12 years. They're not even just saying this year. So what do you think about it, like judging it from a Houston perspective? And do you think there's still hope that they could get a top coach like an Eric Bieniemy because of this? Maybe it's the last option for them, or do you think they're really going to have a tough time?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't actually think they want Bieniemy all that much. I think they put in the interview request just to placate their franchise quarterback in DeShaun Watson, just to be like, well, we're talking to your guys. See, look what we're doing. Please stay. Because it's such a complicated issue because the job in and of itself is still one of 32 and you still have a franchise quarterback. But if there's uncertainty on whether or not that guy is going to, be happy and commit to you long-term, even though he signed through 2025, you're not going to want to take that job unless you get the assurance from ownership and from the player that they're both going to be there, right? That the DeShaun Watson's not going to make this an absolute mess. So I think that's what has slowed down the coaching search. I actually was talking to someone pretty connected to the whole thing earlier today. The name to watch is Leslie Frazier. I think I saw on some sports books he's 5-1. I was told that the Texans are very, very passionate about Frazier. They like the temperament. They want to kind of go with the opposite of Bill O'Brien, who was a big hothead. Leslie Frazier does bring head coaching experience. He is a minority hire, which is something that I've been told is very important to the Texans organization. So look for the name Leslie Frazier. That's my best guess who they end up hiring.
We are talking to the host of the Jake Asman Show on Sports Map Radio, Jake Asman. Now, Jake, you're over there in Houston. What are people saying over there all about this whole DeShaun Watson debacle? I mean, with the organization not going to him to talk about who they're going to put into the GM position. And then all of a sudden, now the coaching, the outlandish questions on where they're going to go with the coaches. And then some of the players, the Hopkins trade, it absolutely affected DeShaun Watson this season, even though he's had a fantastic season, led the league in yards. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. What is the fan saying over there in Houston?
People are very concerned. I mean, they've seen this team go from, 24-0 lead in the divisional round a year ago to here they are coming off a 4-12 season. an offseason in which they traded away the best wide receiver in the NFL for a bag of peanuts. So people are very concerned. They don't have draft capital. They don't have a lot of cap space. The one selling point you have as a fan is that, hey, DeShaun Watson's 25 years old. He's going to give you a chance in every game he plays, and he's that good. I mean, he led the NFL in passing yards, and they still only won 4 games. So what does that tell you about the entire makeup of the roster right now? So people are very worried about Watson. They want to make sure that the franchise quarterback stays happy. And, the number one villain in Houston sports right now is actually 2 people. It's the owner, Cal McNair, because it's on him to ultimately fix this relationship with DeShaun Watson, and the former interim general manager and before that character coach with the Patriots, Jack Easterby, who has no business being around player personnel. He did help with the hiring of Nick Caserio, but he better let Caserio just steer the ship. And if Cal McNair, needs to get rid of Easterby to make Watson happy, then you do it. I don't care how close Easterby is with Caserio. Give Easterby a nice check, tell him to go away, because you cannot choose between, former character coach and 25-year-old franchise quarterback, right? So the whole thing seems so silly, but that's where we are right now. A year after this team was up 24-0 in Kansas City. And if they had won that game, guys, they would have been hosting the AFC Championship game right here in Houston against the Titans, and they would have been a favorite in that game. So it just shows you how crazy the last year has been for the Houston Texan fan.
That's funny, because if that ended up happening, they would have played, I think, 3 times in 6 weeks or something like that. Because remember, they played 15 and 17 at the end of the year.
Yeah, you're right.
So going back to the Jets for DeShaun Watson, is that the scenario you would want the most for the New York Jets? What do you think would be realistic in terms of trading for it too? Or would you rather go after maybe somebody like Fields at number 2, keep Darnold and trade back, keep Darnold, draft Sewell? What do you think is the best scenario?
The whole question pains me, because anyone who's heard me over the years, I'm a huge Sam Darnold fan. I love the guy. I think that he's been failed by Todd Bowles, Jeremy Bates, Adam Gase. They've put nothing around him. I look at Sam as a guy that I still think, with the right coaching, he could be an elite quarterback. I think if he goes to Indy and Frank Reich is coaching him, it's a totally different conversation. But I say all that to say, he might just need a fresh start. So if they're sitting there with the 2nd overall pick, and we'll get to the DeShaun Watson part of that question in a second, if they're sitting there with the 2nd overall pick and they fall in love with one of these quarterbacks, Fields or Wilson or somebody else, if you're Joe Douglas, you didn't draft Sam Darnold. If you're Robert Saleh, he's not really your quarterback. So they could say everything they want to say now about how much they love Sam, and I'm sure that will be a major talking point at the intro press conference tomorrow. But just remember, Cliff Kingsbury said Josh Rosen's our guy. So nothing they say now really matters. I think ultimately, if they don't get Watson, which I'll get to, I think they're drafting a quarterback and they trade Sam. As far as Watson, there is no price on that guy. If they need to trade 4 ones to get him, I'm all for it. This team has 19 first-round picks or 19 total draft picks over the next 2 years. They have 4 first-rounders over the next 2 years. So if you put a package together with the 2nd overall pick 23 from Seattle, your first next year, maybe your first in 2023, whatever it takes, you do it. Well, DeShaun Watson doesn't solve all your issues. Having a top 5 quarterback that's 25 years old signed through the year 2025 certainly puts a premium on other positions, and you don't have to worry about the most important position in sports. And with all the cap space the Jets have and all the extra draft capital they still would have, even if they made a Watson trade, you're still talking about a team that potentially goes from 2 wins to 10 wins just with a couple shrewd moves and Watson being Watson. So hell yeah, whatever it takes to get a guy that good, you do it. I'm just kind of iffy on that actually happening. I still think, gun to my head, he's playing for the Texans week 1 next year.
I want to get into some basketball conversation and another team over there in Houston, which you are over there talking about, James Harden. I mean, all the stories coming out over there is James Harden wanted out. Oh, even in the offseason, he was practicing, he was training with Kevin Durant, and then all of a sudden he came in the offseason, he gained like 20 pounds, he looked fat, and then all of a sudden the stories were coming out that he was demanding his way out of Houston. He wanted to go play for the Brooklyn Nets. He got his wish. He got everything that he wanted. What did you think about the Nets trading for James Harden?
I didn't like it. I think there's way too much risk involved with a move like this. Now, I will say this, because of Kyrie's uncertainty, I almost understand why they felt like they had to do it. I mean, it's such an indictment on Kyrie Irving, the player, that they just don't know if he's going to show up to work on a given day. Like, I understand he's dealing with some personal issues, and I'm not making light of, someone's mental health. But don't give me the mental health, tactic or the mental health excuse, and then you're partying maskless while you're away from the team, right? It's either, you're having some personal issues going on, or, you just don't want to be there. And nobody knows with Kyrie Irving. So I just think the fact that they had to make this deal is a major indictment on Irving. Look, James Harden can play. We know this. And I think the fact that he is now the number 2 on this team and Durant's clearly the number 1, that's good for the Nets' chances. I just wonder about their depth. I just wonder about Steve Nash being a rookie coach. And they basically traded the entire future for 18 months, right? You have Durant and Irving with opt-outs after their 3rd season. Are they committed long-term? I have no idea what Kyrie Irving's doing tomorrow. So we're going to think he's here long-term, right? So I get why the Nets did it. They want to win. They're all in to win. But I think it's a pretty damn indictment on your star player in Irving that you maybe had to make this move because you don't trust him. I think that's where I kind of look at this move and go, wow, that is crazy.
So moving on to the Knicks now, they hired Tom Thibodeau as their coach. Errol actually called that over a year ago in an article. Thibodeau has done a very good job so far, especially defensively with this roster. What have been some of your impressions with the Knicks under Thibodeau so far this season?
I think they play hard. They play good defense. They compete every night. I don't really look at the win-loss record. I look at the effort level. I want to see young guys get better. This is not going to be a quick fix. They're not going to just magically, be the Nets overnight. But how did the Nets do what they did? They built a young core up. They had the assets. They were an attractive place to play. And then ultimately, they traded it all away to get Harden. But they built the core in place first to put themselves in position where stars would want to go there, right? So I think the Knicks are on the path to trying to do something similar. You want to see R.J. Barrett continue to develop. You want to see Mitchell Robinson continue to develop. Can they get something from, Kevin Knox? Do they have something maybe here with Julius Randle? Is he finally going to reach his potential with the coaching that they're giving him? So these are things that I'm watching, and I'm optimistic about the Knicks. Look, they're not a championship contender. We all understand that, but they play hard. I think Thibodeau's a really good coach. And a lot of people were like, oh, would he be able to develop a young core? I think the answer so far is yes. Guys are getting better. Guys are competing. And where effort level in the NBA is kind of, subjective on given nights, if the Knicks just play hard every night, they're going to be in a lot of games and have a chance to steal a lot of games, especially on the road when there's barely any fans. So the Knicks might actually end up being a lot better than any of us thought because they play hard and they're well coached.
Quickly, let's get into some baseball conversation. What were your thoughts with the Francisco Lindor trade? And were you excited, because I know you're a Yankee fan, when the Yankees landed back DJ LeMahieu and obviously signed $11 million contract for 1 year, Corey Kluber?
No issue with the Kluber contract, 1 year, kind of prove it deal, low risk, potentially high reward. I do think the Yankees need more pitching. Maybe that comes in the trade market. I think, that's rather obvious. But, the division is weaker with the Rays losing Snell and Morton. And the Blue Jays, everyone's going nuts about the Blue Jays. Yeah, they have a really good offense, but the number 1 starter right now is Hyun-Jin Ryu, and you couldn't even name me the rest of their rotation, right? So I don't really care about Toronto at this point. As far as LeMahieu, no-brainer. I never for a second thought the Yankees were ever going to let this guy go. Name me the player the Yankees actually wanted that they let walk. You could say, oh, well, Robinson Cano. They didn't really want Robinson Cano. They made a competitive offer 7 years, but they were not going to budge and go 10 like the Mariners did. How's that working out, by the way? So I think ultimately the Yankees did what they had to do with LeMahieu and took a flyer on Kluber. As far as Lindor, what's the risk, right? You didn't really have to give up that much. Carlos Carrasco was a throw-in in that deal. So I think, Sandy Alderson made a great deal there. And you obviously don't make that move unless you plan to sign Lindor long-term. So the Mets will work out a contract between now and I'm sure spring training. And, they're going to have a superstar player, to kind of be the face of their offense going forward, which I think if you're a Met fan, you should be really excited about that trade.
What are your impressions so far of the New York hockey teams and just the start of this NHL season, this 56-game season?
I miss fans. Yeah, that's honestly what I miss the most. It's weird watching Ranger and Islander games at Madison Square Garden. There's nobody there. Watching, the Isles game against the Bruins yesterday or 2 days ago, whenever that was, and there's no one at the barn, right? So it's weird. I think the teams that are well coached, that have togetherness, that have chemistry, are going to be the ones that succeed early on because this is so new. And the fact that the Islanders have the best coach in hockey and they have such a veteran group that's been playing together for years now, I think they're at a huge advantage early on. And, I'm excited to see kind of how this season unfolds. But, as an Islander fan, I like what I've seen so far. Obviously they had the one game against the Rangers where, Varlamov gets hurt, minutes before, the puck set the drop. And that kind of was a throwaway game. But, I'm excited to see what this team could do. They're certainly a championship contender, which as an Islander fan over the last 20-something years, we have not really been able to say that all too much. So I will gladly take that.